Shabbat Shalom, everyone. I knew about Rabbi Siegel before I even came to Beth Yeshurun. As many people have already remarked over the past several days, his reputation truly extends well beyond Beth Yeshurun and well beyond Houston and even well beyond the great state of Texas, as gigantic as it is. While I was still in rabbinical school, I prepared a statement for our movement on the subject of organ donations. Now, I wasn't on the law committee, obviously, because I was still a student, and the committee is composed of some of our greatest rabbis and teachers that consider new questions in matters of Jewish law. When they write an opinion on a particular question, that opinion is called a teshuvah, an answer. And it's sort of like a legal opinion of the Supreme Court in United States law. I was only in rabbinical school, so I obviously could not write a teshuvah, but the movement used to publish its position papers for our congregations that explained these teshuvot, or decisions, taken by the law committee, and to provide resources to congregations so the rest of us can learn more about the subject. And that, writing that paper, is something a rabbinical student can do. Anyway, I was assigned to write this position paper explaining our movement's view on organ donations. By the way, I think our movement says it's a great mitzvah to donate organs if you are in a position to save someone's life, just so we get that out of the way. And the very first rabbi in our movement to write a teshuvah on this subject was, yes, you got it, Rabbi Jack Siegel of Houston, Texas. It's not at all surprising that Rabbi Siegel wrote an opinion about the permissibility of heart transplants. He had the knowledge and wisdom he gained from learning Jewish texts, and Houston was where the first successful heart transplants were performed. Rabbi Siegel was ordained by the very prestigious ultra-Orthodox yeshiva, Rav Chaim Berlin. Several other very famous rabbis learned at this yeshiva as well, including Rabbi David Weiss Halivni, a highly respected Talmud scholar who taught at the Jewish Theological Seminary, where I attended, although many years later. Rabbi David Hartman, the founder of the Shalom Hartman Institute in Jerusalem, where I also attended. Rabbi Aaron Lichtenstein, the founder of Yeshiva Har Etzion in Gush Etzion. Rabbi Noah Weinberg, the co-founder of Yeshiva Or Sameach, and the founder of Esha Torah. In other words, Rabbi Siegel's training came from an outstanding, although very orthodox, yeshiva. Combined with Rabbi Siegel's own personal keen intellect, his training enabled him to be an outstanding scholar of Jewish thought and traditions. So, Rabbi Siegel was well prepared to write an opinion on the permissibility under Jewish law to perform organ transplants. And then there was the fact that, as I mentioned, the medical technique and skills of performing heart transplants was developed right here in Houston at the medical center with Doctors Denton Cooley and Michael DeBakey. So, of course, he wrote the first opinion in our movement on heart transplants in August 1969. I believe it was one of the first opinions on the subject to be written anywhere in the world. Although it's recorded in the Rabbinical Assembly archives, it was not officially voted on by the law committee, so it's often overlooked by people who are researching this question. The official opinion of the law committee did not come out until 1995, almost a quarter of a century after Rabbi Siegel had already reached the same conclusion. So, as we have said many times in the past several days, Rabbi Siegel was way ahead of his time. Rabbi Siegel, as we know, was not Orthodox. He fit very well into the conservative movement, which struggles on the borderline between maintaining traditions while adapting to the modern world that we live in. And we were so blessed to have his wisdom for decades. He was, as many have already said, a rabbi's rabbi. I would frequently ask him questions about all kinds of matters, and very often he would give me a Jewish source off the top of his head. Or in those few cases where he would say, let me look into that, he'd have the next day a page on my desk with all kinds of quotations from several Jewish sources. He wrote at least one other opinion for our movement, by the way, and this one is relevant right now during the Jewish calendar. In 1968, he wrote an opinion on when marriages can be conducted during the 3 weeks leading up to Tisha B'Av. This opinion was officially adopted by the Law Committee, and as far as I know, is still the most often cited opinion in our movement. For those scoring at home, we are now in the 3-week period leading up to Tisha B'Av, which will be 2 weeks from now on the evening services on Wednesday, July 26th, continuing to the evening of Thursday, July 27th. So we are in this 3-week period now when there's a question about performing marriages. Tisha B'Av commemorates the destruction of the first and second temples in Jerusalem. It's therefore a day of mourning and fasting. And so it is obviously not appropriate to schedule a joyous occasion like a wedding on Tisha B'Av when we're all supposed to be mourning. And the 17th day of the month of Tammuz, which is 3 weeks before Tisha B'Av, is a minor fast day because that's the day when the walls of the city of Jerusalem were breached by the Romans, the first step toward the destruction of the city. The 3 weeks in between have traditionally been held to be somber days on which we should not eat meat, which was considered a luxury, and we should keep other customs traditionally observed by mourners. Some strict opinions stated that we cannot conduct Jewish weddings at any time during these 3 weeks. However, Rabbi Siegel concluded that for a variety of reasons, which he spent several pages explaining, including the rebirth of the State of Israel, the modern custom should be that weddings should not take place on the 17th of Tammuz itself or on the 9th day of Av itself. Weddings can take place from the 18th of Tammuz to the end, including the last day of Tammuz. And only small private weddings in the rabbi's study or in a chapel can take place between the 1st of Av and the 8th of Av. And like I said, that has been the most accepted opinion in our movement since he wrote it. So as I've already said, as I had already heard about Rabbi Siegel long before I was offered a position here as a rabbi, but meeting him live and in person was a whole different ballgame. He was so much more than a scholar, as we all know. He was a force of nature. He never slowed down. He absolutely never stopped. I'm not sure that he actually slept very much at night because he was always calling people, writing people, visiting people, and thinking about what he was going to say in future sermons and classes. I absolutely received my share of Rabbi Siegel's notes, telling me how much he enjoyed my sermons on the holidays or other times of the year, but I'm sure that I received my share of comments like, "Very interesting, Steve," as Rabbi Strauss remarked on a few days ago. Rabbi Siegel was a scholar, a tzaddik, which is a righteous person, and a source of inspiration and support for those who needed it. He was lively, full of energy, dynamic, with a showman's sense of humor that was captivating. Whether it was smashing the wedding glass to smithereens, or showering praise with stupendous, or his siman tov and mazel tov and mazel tov and siman tov, the call and response, or the chocolates he handed out after services, or the alphabet soup of acronyms, SOS, TNT, ESP, and all the other ones which I've forgotten. We are so delighted with his trademark phrases and expressions, and it didn't matter how many times he repeated them. In my comment on Facebook, in response to Beth Yeshurun's notice of Rabbi Siegel's passing, I wrote that if the ocean were full of ink, there would not be enough to write praises and gratitude for the wisdom and light he has given. Some people may have noticed that I borrowed the idea of a sea of ink. The original version, at least in Jewish sources, is from a midrash in the biblical book, The Song of Songs. There, Rabbi Eliezer says, "If all the seas were ink, and all the ponds were writing reeds, and heaven and earth were scrolls, and all the people were scribes, they would not suffice to write down all the Torah that I have learned during my lifetime. Yet I have not taken away from my teachers any more than one who dips a small brush into the sea." Rabbi Siegel, for us, was a teacher like the ones Rabbi Eliezer had. He gave us a sea of wisdom, of love, and of kindness, and truly there is not enough ink in the sea to express our gratitude and appreciation for being such a role model. I want to conclude with remarks about someone who's not Jewish, and it'll become obvious why I chose to conclude with this story. It's about a man named Christopher Wren who lived in 17th century England. He was an architect, a scientist, and an astronomer. And in the wake of the Great Fire which destroyed London, Christopher Wren was appointed surveyor of the king's works. And as such, he replanned the entire city of London. He supervised the building of 51 churches, and he began plans for rebuilding St. Paul's Cathedral. When he died at the age of 90, Wren was buried in St. Paul's. There was no monument erected in the cathedral to mark his tomb. Rather, a simple plaque was posted with his date of death and then this inscription: "Reader, if you seek a monument, look around you." That was all that was written. If you seek a monument, look around you. In other words, the visitor was invited to look all around the cathedral and see the magnificent structure that Wren had designed, as well as the buildings all around London, and then you would get a glimmer of the kind of person he was. And this evening, I invite all of us to look around this very building and to look around this very room at all of us here, and we will see evidence of Rabbi Siegel's love and compassion for every human being. His indomitable spirit, his determined optimism, despite some very challenging times which have been mentioned. He was determined to be optimistic. Focus on the bagel, not on the whole. See the glass is half full, not half empty. When man closes doors, God opens windows. And one lyric that was also the favorite of my father's: you've got to accentuate the positive, eliminate the negative, latch onto the affirmative, and don't mess with Mr. In-Between. We have all been given an extraordinary gift to be part of the congregation that Rabbi Siegel has shaped and developed with intention and with determination, to be a welcoming, positive, and caring community. We no longer have Rabbi Siegel with us in the physical world, but we can still feel his presence among us, and we can remember all the wonderful times we had with him, and we can honor his legacy most by perpetuating those values that he embodied in his long and prolific life. Zicharon Tzadik Livracha, may the Tzadik's memory be for a blessing.